We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
I may not be a millionaire. I may not have a brand new Frigidaire. My clothes ain't all fancy, and my car ain't brand new. But there is joy in my house. I've got
Welcome, everybody, to Join My House, an inspirational reality radio show where nothing is left unsaid.
And no one is insignificant who says it.
If you're joining us today, we welcome you as an audience, viewers, and listeners. If you're joining us from just getting out of service, we want to thank you for being a part of our show today. Our show is an internet reality radio show where we bring fellow travelers on the road to recovery, businessmen and women who have kept Christ in the center of their lives.
Yes.
And we have very special guests with amazing testimonies and life-changing decisions you won't want to miss. So we want to thank you again for joining us today. This is Joy in My House, ladies and gentlemen. I am joined here by my co-host, Lolita Robinson.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
I'm looking forward to today. I'm going to listen.
If you don't know Lolita Robinson is a contemporary Christian singer, author of Shaped by the Master's Hand, and has currently 2 CDs out. Her first album, self-titled Lolita, and her second album, Changes. And you can find her on lrcministries.com, or you can find her on Facebook, Lolita Robinson Coppage. She's available to speak and sing at your events. Please give her a call if you're interested. Now we have a very special guest today, Bruce S.
Yay.
Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joel. Pleasure to be here today.
Yeah.
Well, last week we had an amazing young lady come and give her testimony on surrender and forgiveness, Tammy Anderson. And I want to do a quick recap. She was able to forgive and to surrender to God and has completely transformed her life. Now, if you're just joining us today, please feel free to follow us on Ustream.tv and catch any previous shows on Ustream.tv/LA Talk Live. Lolita, how did you feel about last week's show with Tammy?
It was really pretty heavy. It was very inspirational to see that God does work in people's lives. My book talks about the many ways that God shapes people's lives, and Tammy has a relationship with her perpetrator, and I and myself and others who have been in that situation didn't follow in that pursuit, but God is a big God and we can't put him in a box, and I'm so proud of her and what she's doing in her life today.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty amazing how transparent she was and,
Yes, she
and
was.
willing to come on the show. And I hope that it also helps her to come on the show and be transparent. I know for me, this show holds me accountable even through my mistakes and my trials and tribulations, because
Right.
it's a difficult thing, this
Yes.
walk that we walk.
Yes, it is. It's not one shot. It's not a one shot thing. It's a journey.
It is. It's a process, especially for me.
Okay.
I know that for me, on my day-to-day basis, I struggle. I struggle, and I constantly have to keep hitting my knees and telling God to continue his work. And like we talked about a few episodes ago, that I hope that he doesn't forget the work that he started in me, because sometimes it gets a little
does.
lonely.
Yeah, and sometimes we got to get a reminder. We get ahead of ourselves and think we're feeling all good and rosy and I've got it now. And the Lord has to show us, okay, after we drive our car to a ditch again for the 50th time, I'm still in charge here, not to forget it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, if you'd like to continue the conversation with us, please find us on Facebook, /Joy in My House, or you can tweet us directly at twitter.com/Joy in My House, or you can call in to the radio station with any questions or comments. Today, we're going to be talking about sexual addiction. I think that's every man's battle. The line is 323-247-7443. And once again, you can follow us on Facebook /Joy in My House and become a follower, where you'll get up-to-date guest lineups and up-and-coming artists that are coming on, so you can keep up and keep posted on the things that we're doing here on Joy in My House. Once again, I'd like to welcome all you listeners and viewers out there. We really appreciate your support. This show has come together really by God's hands. Sometimes we feel, or sometimes I feel, well, what am I doing here? Am I really to host this show? But luckily I've had some really great accountability partners and people that have come alongside me to put on a show like this, like Lolita.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's important about accountability. Like I said today, I can't wait to hear Bruce speak because he's got a lot to say, and I cannot wait to hope the viewers out there will realize. I have a cough drop. Sorry, my throat. That this is a heavy subject, and we always like to make that known before we get started. If you have little ones around, you might want to, give them a coloring book or something. But please listen in and call us. Call us. We like to hear calls and ask our guest some questions because he's got a lot to say.
Well, I'd like to welcome Bruce. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you again.
Thank you for coming on board. I met Bruce through a Celebrate Recovery meeting out in Orange County, and I do a CR program out there, and I've been there for quite some time now, and currently on my third step study there, that has really done wonders. And we're gonna have one of the state representatives on November 25th, Kathy Taylor, come on the show. But I got an opportunity to hear Bruce's testimony on sexual addiction. And it really touched my heart because I believe that I struggle with my eyes, my mind, sometimes veering away from what God really has in store for me. So hearing his testimony, it really touched me, and I felt it important for me to hear it again. And now that the show has come to be, I thought, what a great opportunity for Bruce to come and share his transparency and the work that God has done in his life on this show for you guys as well as for me. So Bruce, once again, I'm very excited to have you here on this show. I think you have a great testimony. I think your transparency gives me a lot of hope for me personally. So thank you for being on the show one more time. Let's talk a little bit about your growing up, your history.
Well, I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, and I grew up there in the early '60s. And I came from what today we would call a single-parent household. It was my mom and my grandma. My parents split up when I was 4 years old, so I never really knew my dad, at least not well, especially when I was young. And he did his best to stay involved in my life. He was there on the weekends, but it was tough. And one of the things that was also really difficult for me growing up was I was just a weak, scrawny kid. I had thick Coke bottle glasses.
Wow.
I was picked on all the time. I was always the last kid ever picked for any sports activities, and gym classes were horribly humiliating for me because I was a scrawny kid. And one of my vivid memories, and maybe you or some of our listeners would remember the President's Council on Physical Fitness testing that we had to do every year. And that was just humiliating for me.
Wow.
I couldn't do a single chin-up. I just hang on the bar and
Wow.
look pitiful, and trying to climb ropes and just doing those kinds of athletic things. And
Well, during that time, did you have friends and people that you got along with, or were you more of a loner?
I did have friends, but because I was picked on a lot, I tended to create a lot of fantasy world for me. I tended to live in sort of a fantasy world. And then, that kind of took me up into junior high, that sort of, geeky, awkward kid, didn't fit in, didn't really feel very connected. And when I was 14 years old, my mother married an alcoholic.
Oh, boy.
And my mother was already not the most emotionally healthy person.
What do you mean by that?
She was extremely negative, worried all the time. We lived with the constant fear of financial ruin. There was always this, they're going to come repossess our house, our furniture.
Right.
And so she was always very negative. And so she married he was a pilot.
Wow.
And a very charismatic guy, but also a raging alcoholic. And so at 14, I went from geeky to living hell. And I had my first drink when I was 12 years old, and by 16 I was drinking regularly.
So you were drinking before your mother met?
I had it was kind of part of the
kids introduced you to it, or how did you?
Actually, it was at a neighbor's house.
Oh, wow.
But by the time I was 16, I was regular. I looked old. I had facial hair, and the legal drinking age at the time was 18 years old, and I knew the bars that didn't card, and so I was drinking a lot. I was abusing prescription drugs, and I was abusing inhalants. And so I went through a period of teenage years there where I was acting out with chemicals. What I like to talk about is really what I call my black hole.
Okay, that's important.
And because of the way I grew up and never really feeling like I think I got those basic emotional needs met, I had this black hole. And so, I tried a lot of different things to fill that black hole. When I was younger, one of the things that I tried, I was good at school. So academics and pleasing my teachers was one of the early ways that I tried to fill up that black hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I struggle with that too. I sometimes feel like I have this hole and this void that I want to fill, and I call it my God-shaped hole because God was kind of the only thing that really filled it and made me feel that I wasn't being condemned or judged. But yeah, I feel that too through my acting out, drinking and abusing chemicals. I was trying to feel that, and then I come to find out the more I did it, the more I needed, and the less it filled me. And it was this vicious cycle that I just could not get out of, even thinking that I was doing the things to fill it.
Absolutely. And of course, ultimately, neither the academics, neither the chemicals, that did not fill up the black hole. And I actually was first introduced to Christ in high school.
Oh.
My best friend in high school, his father was a pastor of a church in Des Moines, and he invited me to their youth group, and I began attending their early high school, and it was a tumultuous time. But one of the things that I found was there at the youth group was a group of kids and a youth pastor who loved me when I was pretty unlovable. Or at least my behavior was pretty unlovable. And so, they taught me about the love of Christ, and that gave me some hope.
That was a foundation, at least.
It was a bit of a light, and that was a very dark time for me. My lowest point came, I was 17 years old, and a girlfriend of mine that I'd had for a year and a half had just broken up with me.
Well, you must not have been geeky anymore.
I was geeky.
Oh, yeah. Did you meet her in your circle of other kids that were doing drugs, or was she?
Well, I lived two lives.
Okay.
I learned very early on to compartmentalize my life. I'm an only child, and so in one part of my life, I was the hero child. I was the good student.
Okay.
And I was terribly guilt-ridden. I didn't want to give my mother or my grandmother who lived with us any heartache. So to them, I was the hero child. Then I had my circle of geeky friends who were successful students, and one of them, there's a couple of doctors, a couple of lawyers, and there's some engineers. They were geeky kids like me, and we did geeky things. I didn't act out with them. And then there was my group of friends that I drank with, and
oh boy, how confusing that had to have been.
And I could see that how
Wow.
how you separate everything. I thought the same thing. I thought this is my business life, this is my family life, this is my relationship life, and then there's my party life.
Yep.
And as I got older, I found out that those things overflow into every other compartment. I thought, I can do this as long as I'm very good here. And then when I'm here, I can be a different person and do this well. And then here, I can party and have fun here.
Yep.
But as I got older, I found out that everything affects everything. I'm the same person no matter where I go. I couldn't run from myself. And I kind of find that as the foundation to my codependency. So I find out that now I just want to do everything great, but I found out that I couldn't.
And it takes a while. I mean, the process of recovery for me is really learning to break down the silos that create those compartments.
Well, I think that's really interesting, especially for women in hearing this, because I'm going to ask you from a women's standpoint. We don't necessarily compartmentalize like that. We multitask. We have to, change diapers, answer the phone, pay bills, and vacuum the house. So hearing this to me is it's amazing that men know this is how you tend to operate. So it's possible for you to have this life going on and really feel like you're doing okay in one area and then have all this other stuff going on without it overlapping until recovery?
Until the train wreck happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
and so, I mentioned that in high school, then I had gotten exposed to the love of Christ through the high school youth group. And
you're talking about the girlfriend.
Yeah, and okay, sorry. So the 17 years old, she had broken up with me. It's late one night. I'm doing 75 miles an hour, 69 Impala, heading for a phone pole. Wow. I had just given up trying to fill the black hole. I was done. And at the time, I didn't know why I chickened out and didn't follow through with my suicide plans. Today, I see that God had intervened in my life in ways that I didn't know, I didn't understand, I didn't recognize. But at the time, I was just pretty desperate. And the youth group really helped me through that. And I managed to get through that crisis time in my life. And then I basically ran away from home the way a good hero child student would do. I went away to college.
Oh, good point. Good point.
And so in college, I entered therapy for the first time. I had met my future wife actually in high school. We had our first date in high school, actually. Why, I have no idea, because I was still pretty screwed up.
Now,
but
was she a good girl?
she was. She's a pastor's kid.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
That's what we do.
And
good girls go and get you fellas, and we start the party.
yeah, well, I kind of had orphaned myself out to her family because it was a lot more normal seeming than my
Wow.
family.
Yeah.
But by the time I had gotten into college and gotten a little bit, I'd stopped abusing chemicals, and today I have 35 years free of substance
Wow,
abuse.
congratulations.
But
But, huh?
But
It's a big but. Okay.
the big but was my secret,
Okay.
and the big but was early in my life I had discovered masturbation, like 6 or 7 years old, and that became my drug of choice. Sexual release became my drug of choice, and I pursued that high for 40 years.
Wow.
Wow.
How
And
did that look? I mean, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but, and without being too graphic, when did you start looking at material when you were younger?
well, I was
or-
exposed to pornography at my uncle's house when I was probably in junior high school, and then the friend whose father was the pastor at the church in Des Moines had a pornography stash.
Oh, the
pastor.
pastor's son,
Mhm.
or the pastor himself.
Yes, and so
That's
we
very
would.
important for people to know.
He and my best friend, we would indulge in his father's pornography.
Wow.
Wow. Well, before we start going deeper into that, now you have quite a few accolades. You were well educated in school.
I was. I finished my bachelor's degree. I graduated. I was a Phi Beta Kappa. I went on to graduate school, got a graduate degree in psychology, because of course I wanted to help other people,
Yeah, you
but
wanna fix
that
others.
was really codependency. I
Yeah,
just
that's
wanted to
right.
fix them.
No, that's very true.
And I worked in the field for quite a while, doing therapeutic work, and then moved more into. I got involved in employee assistance work, and then into mental health benefits.
So you were still achieving. You were still over.
Well,
that was still, which is good.
Yeah, I mean that work was something, and as work went well, my secular work time in secular recovery kind of dwindled away, but that kind of also allowed my little secret compartmentalized life to continue.
Well, it seems like, a lot of men struggle with this. I know as men, we tend to act out many different ways, but this is one that's talked about very little. We tend to kind of sweep this one under the rug, but I think this is a very important topic to talk about: sexual addiction. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in, we're joined here by Bruce, who is being very transparent with us and giving us his testimony on his sexual addiction. Now, if you're out there have any questions or comments, please feel free to call in. I know for men, just in general, that we struggle with a lot of these emotional issues, these emotional voids that we want to fill, and sometimes we do it through these actions of acting out. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to tweet in at twitter.com/joinmyhouse. You can find us on Facebook /joinmyhouse, or you can tweet us directly here on twitter.com/LA Talk Live. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. Yes, Lolita, go ahead.
Before we go, I just wanted to clarify for the women that are listening out there. A lot of times, our dark hole or empty place, we want to fill it with you gentlemen in relationships. So I would like for the women to track and see how these relationships come together, how we marry men with these problems, and we ourselves have these holes that we're looking for you guys to fill. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there for the women listening in.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, women, if you're out there listening, please feel free to call in, tweet in as well. Once again, this is Joy in My House. If you're just joining us, please stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
He died for me. In the early dawn of day, he quietly slips away. A peaceful and calm.
Hi, this is Susie Pruden. And yes, you've seen me on Oprah, Good Morning America, and The Today Show. And I'm inviting you to join me every Monday from 3 to 4 for my new show, Mastermind Live. Join us as we introduce you to the new thought leaders of the world who will inspire you, support you, and guide you to your next level. So don't forget to tune into Mastermind Live exclusively on latalklive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B or watch us on Ustream TV. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Hey everybody, this is Richard Carr inviting you to join me in the radio boardroom for the new Entrepreneurs Weekly Summit in my all-new day and time. That's right, the new Entrepreneurs Weekly Summit is moving to Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific. So don't forget, the new Entrepreneurs Weekly Summit, now Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific, exclusively here on LA Talk Live, where it's more than just talk. We'll see you there.
Welcome back to Join My House, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just tuning in, I'm joined here by my co-host Lolita Robinson.
Hello, how are ya?
And special guest Bruce. I met Bruce through a Celebrate Recovery meeting out in Orange County and had the opportunity to hear his testimony on sexual addiction, which really touched me. And I felt it a blessing to hear him speak and be as transparent as he has been, which allowed me to invite him over onto this show, Join My House, where he's being just as transparent as he was when I first heard him give his testimony. So if you're out there listening with any questions or comments, please feel free to call in at 323-247-7443, or you can tweet us directly at twitter.com/joinmyhouse, twitter.com/LATalkLive, or you can find us on Facebook /JoyInMyHouse. Now, once again, Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you
for coming on and sharing your story, because through your struggles, your challenges, we learn through your experiences. So we want to thank you again for being as transparent as you are. I find it just refreshing to engage with people who are being honest and being real. I know it's a process. It's not something that's done overnight. But as we go through this journey called life, and with recovery and Christ as our foundation, it allows us to be more and more real, more and more honest, not only with other people, but with ourselves.
Right.
So welcome back. Now, you were speaking before we went on break about your relationship and how you were getting into pornography and looking at pornography, and it was starting to affect you.
Yeah, that was really the beginning. And pornography led to, I would characterize it as a progression, where pornography begets fantasies, and fantasies beget fetishes and perversions, and as my own secret acting out continued, the walls around it grew, because you mentioned earlier in the show, Joel, that there's not a lot talked about.
Right. This is something that's always kind of swept under the rug. It's like,
because there's a high shame factor.
I agree.
And it's not unlike, I think, alcoholism was in the days before Betty Ford went public. Mm-hmm. And Betty Ford really made it okay to be an alcoholic. Sexual addiction, I think, still lives a lot in the shadows.
Yeah, I do too.
And sex addiction is, if you talk about alcoholism.
Well, let's talk about what is sexual addiction.
Well, and I think it's not one thing.
Okay.
I mean, you can say, well, alcoholism is a disease where one is emotionally, psychologically, and or physically addicted to ethyl alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But ethyl alcohol comes in a number of forms.
Yes, it does.
And so does sexual addiction. For some men, sexual addiction is confined to pornography.
Mm-hmm.
For other men, it may be acting out with others, whether that's in, say, massage parlors or prostitutes.
Multiple partners, you're saying?
Multiple or multiple or serial relationships.
Okay.
I mean, they could be either anonymous relationships like prostitutes, massage parlors, etc., or they could be actual emotionally involved relationships, but just one right after another.
Okay,
So
not giving yourself a time. We call that for the women relationship addicts.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was my thing.
And then of course there's I guess what you might call more darker types of sexual addiction, things that could get into ritualistic behaviors.
Even your murderers who do stuff,
Yes.
who act out in sociopathic type of stuff.
And serial pedophiles, serious pedophiles.
Wow. So it has degrees.
So it does have degrees, and I mean I see men who have spanned the whole spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
and for me I never cheated on my wife. I was never unfaithful. I never spent any money on pornography, and those were a couple of things that I used to minimize how I didn't have a problem.
Oh, okay.
Right,
So
right.
that's like some people saying, well, I just drink at certain times. I only have beer. I don't have hard
Exactly.
liquor.
Exactly.
I can quit whenever I want.
Mhm.
I have a few drinks after work. I'm glad you're clarifying that because I didn't even think of it that way. So you
Yeah.
do that even with that.
And for some men, it's maybe one affair.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is that they were not able to be faithful to
Mm-hmm.
their vows to their wife.
Well, how did this affect your marriage? Well, first of all, when did you get married during this?
I got married. In when we were 25 years old,
Okay.
right after I finished graduate school. That's an interesting question because I was able to keep my masturbation really separate. It directly didn't have what I would consider a major impact, but for years I felt it had a spiritual impact.
And wow, what do you mean?
I felt that my secret acting out, my secret masturbation was damaging my relationship on a spiritual level. That there was an element of spiritual warfare going on there. And in the mid 2000s, I began a leadership program that placed a strong emphasis on character development.
Mm-hmm.
And as I went through that program, I really began to get even more convicted that this secret acting out, this silo in which I lived, that part of my life, was a problem. And
Well, if you weren't cheating on your wife, people probably want to say, well, what was the harm in it? What were you, if you weren't cheating and you weren't going to massage parlors and you weren't buying prostitutes, then how was that a problem? So maybe you can.
well, and it's interesting because those are all rationales as to why it would not be a problem.
Right.
And in our culture would tell you, well, it's not a problem,
Right. If you're not doing it, you're not hurting anybody.
not hurting anybody. And so in September of 2008, I was at a men's retreat. And the speaker at the men's retreat was talking about sexual addiction. What a setup. And he said a couple of things that just really penetrated my heart. One thing that he said that there's no such thing as dabbling in pornography.
Mm-hmm.
And then he redefined pornography as anything that one uses to arouse himself. So, when people think of pornography, they tend to think of the hardcore stuff, the triple X stuff.
That's true. Yeah.
But there are a lot of men who find eroticism in, again, pornography span a spectrum.
Right.
And so they can find eroticism in a lot of different things. And you'd be amazed at the number of men who say, well, the Sunday paper.
Wow.
Right.
Well, what's in the Sunday paper? Lingerie ads.
Mm-hmm.
Flipping through the J.C. Penney, the Macy's, the
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And so when the speaker at that meeting redefined pornography as anything that you use to arouse yourself, and it just hit me to the core. It penetrated me, and he on the last day of that retreat on Sunday, he brought out a box of poker chips,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, "All right, any man who picked up a poker chip says, if you're willing to be all in, just like in a poker game, you're willing to be all in, come up here and take a chip." So I went up, and that was That was on September the 14th of 2008. And so today I have 1,519 days of sexual sobriety.
Oh, wow.
And to define that, sexual sobriety, at least as we talk about it in Celebrate Recovery, means no form of sex with oneself or anyone else other than one's spouse.
Wow.
Well, I'm also thinking from the standpoint, I think women emotionally can pick up when there's something going on. If there's an area that you're not open to, it would cause a problem emotionally if you have an aspect of your part of your life that your wife is not
integrated with. I think that's intimacy.
You know?
Yes, and it now
you
today.
have a secret part of yourself that you're keeping out of the relationship.
Exactly. And today, as I look back on it, I can see how it did damage our intimacy.
Can you share with our audience, kind of without, like I said, within, confined? We don't want to have all the grim details, but in which way did you think it affected your wife?
Well, one of the things that we talk about in sexual addiction recovery, in Celebrate Recovery, is we say that, we thought that our problem was sex. We thought that we either didn't have enough of it or not in the right way, or maybe even we had too much of it. But what we really learned was that our problem was not sex. Sex was just a symptom.
That's right.
The real problem, and what the real problem was for me, was that black hole. And I was trying to fill that black hole. I was trying to get the intimacy that I craved through sexual release. And whether that was in fantasy, or however I acted out, I was trying to get that black hole filled through inappropriate means, through means that were bound to fail.
Oh, wow. I can see that. It's interesting when you're talking. I got into this thing for a while I was reading all these love novels, and going to all these movies, relationships, and I found that really, I had to stop going, because what it did was there was a hole that was empty inside of me, and I'm looking for this man to come who looks like Fabio or whatever you want to call it, Denzel Washington or whoever, who's going to come in and be this strapping man, this loving man. He's going to rescue me from me. And I would read these novels and I'd be all engrossed in the novels. And then when they were done, I'd be so depressed and dissatisfied with my life. And I can see how that would be for a man to come home with 4 kids and a little baby and not have, it's from the standpoint of a woman. You understand what I'm saying?
It's that fantasy that we're talking about. That
exactly.
We create this fantasy world, and then we have to constantly, when we go back to reality, we're so disappointed that we have to go back to the fantasy.
Right.
Joelle, when I would let fantasy rule in my life, reality cannot compete. It just could not. And what I have found is that that my favorite bad feelings are fear and inadequacy.
Right.
Wow.
And those go back to my childhood. And so,
because you even talk about in your childhood how you lived this fantasy world.
Exactly.
Tell us more about the fantasy world. Were you a superhero? What did you feel?
I was usually an athlete, because I sucked at it so bad in real life.
Oh, wow.
That in my childhood fantasies, I was usually an athlete. But as I got into junior high, beginning to mature, puberty, and all that, then I was whatever the version of Fabio was in 1968.
I'm just using him, Fabio. You're a good guy. I'm just using him.
And so I was incredibly wanted by the ladies, because I had thick glasses and was not. So
even if you get one woman that's interesting and loves you, it's not enough if it's not more than one.
Well, it's like mom. Of course, mom loves you.
Right.
Yeah.
So
the wife is like, well, yeah, you love me, but that's not every other woman out there.
So you have this need for validation, and if you and men can seek out that need for validation in different ways. I mean, just recently, what's just popped up in the news?
General
Petraeus.
Right, that's right. I wanted to bring that. I was like, Mike, when are you guys gonna get it? A 4-star general? How does that happen?
Doesn't matter what you have in your life. You got that hole in there, and you're trying to fill it. And
well, what kind of hole could he have? I mean, money, prestige,
doesn't matter.
Power,
doesn't matter.
What is, that's something I think most women are like, I just don't get it. How do you allow this area to?
Because the hole is in your heart. It's not in what you have. And I just this morning I was meeting with one of the men that I sponsor who just lost a significant chunk of his sexual sobriety.
Oh boy.
And and we were talking about what that need to be validated. And if
I think that validation is very important too. As a man, we feel that we need to provide for our family. We need to provide and protect our wives and raise our children. And sometimes if we're not spiritually whole, but just emotionally whole, it's hard to get that from our children. It's hard to get that from our wives. And then we tend to act out in this, like you said, this fantasy world where, like you said, it can't even compare to the reality of what we have, because we can't even accept the validation because we're so broken. And I think part of this recovery for me is to get back to the place where I can accept that love. I can accept that validation from somebody that does fill me in that aspect of my life.
Absolutely. And
Well, but that's probably only God then, really.
Well, it ultimately
if you think
it
about
is.
it, because
It is. I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that we have that God-shaped hole.
Right.
But it's coming to terms with that, because one of the things that I discovered in recovery was that my sex life was the one area of my life that I had not surrendered to God. I mean, on the outside, I looked very successful. My financial life, my family life, my family,
Do you
my
have
wife.
children, by the way?
I have one.
Okay.
And
Boy, girl?
Boy.
Okay.
And most all of those areas of my life, I had surrendered.
But that
But
one
the
area.
one area I did not trust God with my sex life.
Well, what did you think would happen? What does a man feel? I know you can't talk for every man, but what does a man feel like if he surrenders that area? What's going to happen? He's going to become not attractive anymore, or what's the fear?
For me, it was I would be disappointed. I wouldn't have my needs met.
Oh.
And I go needs, air quotes, because one of the other things that I've learned in recovery is that what I thought were needs are really just wants.
Okay.
And I say this to the guys that I sponsor today. Sex is not a need. It is a drive. There's a biological urge. There's no denying that sex is a drive, but it is not a need. You will not die if you do not have sex.
That's right.
Well, it's almost like, I think you have to clarify it a little bit more. It's like somebody saying, well, when I hear that, it's almost like a crash diet. You can't eat candy anymore. You can't eat cookies anymore. You can't eat ice cream. You just have to have vegetables, and you just have to have, all this yucky, healthy foods. How can you compensate? Say, yes, you're giving that up, but you will be getting your needs met. It changes. You know what I'm saying? How can you?
It changes when your expectations change.
Okay,
There's
so
a
it's the
saying.
mind.
There's a saying in the program. Expectations are simply premeditated resentments.
Right.
That's right.
And so we learn to begin to give up our expectations. And the change in my life and in my marriage did not happen until I was willing to surrender and accept, particularly accept my wife for who and what exactly she
Reality.
is.
A beautiful woman who loves you.
And once I did that, things began to change. But you have to be able to deal with those core root issues.
Right.
And it must have been a process.
A long process. I mean, I've been 1,519 days is roughly 4 years and 3 months.
Boy, you really wow, you
One day at a time.
One day
At a time.
And you must have really been focusing to keep from falling off the wagon, as you say.
It was harder at first. I mean, guys ask me this, new guys in CR says, "Well, does it get easier?" Yeah, it does. It does get easier. And we say don't quit before the miracle happens.
That's right.
Because it is a process of peeling the onion. And I had thought that through previous 12-step work and previous counseling, I thought I'd peeled that onion and dealt with the issues of fear and inadequacy.
Right.
When I first got into Celebrate Recovery, I was in what's called a men's issues group, which is kind of a codependency catch-all group. But as I started to peel the onion, I began to notice that I suffered from what I call me-itis. Everything is all about me. And the other thing that I began to notice was that the number one subject that I was so, centered around as it related to me was sex.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly after that was the experience that I had at that men's retreat. And when I came back and left the men's issues group at Celebrate Recovery and joined the men's SA group there.
And we talk about sexual recovery and sexual surrender, but you have to be very vigilant. It's not something that's actually, like, oh, I just won't go to bars and I won't drink, or I just won't hang out with that crowd and I won't, do drugs. You have to be very vigilant when it comes to sexual recovery.
And
it's conniving. It's deceitful.
And I will say that I'm a freak in our culture today, because I strive to avert my eyes. I strive to not stare, not engage. Our culture is just absolutely full.
Oh, geez. I don't know how you men do it. I really don't. My heart goes out to you.
Well, the sexual imagery. I mean, it's everywhere.
Everywhere.
You drive down the freeway, adult con billboards.
Whoa.
Right.
You, I mean, when adult con comes around, it's just, low.
The way the women
very
dress and
revealing clothes that prior to recovery was like, and in recovery it's like, ooh, bounce the eyes.
Yeah, Well, when I hear about this accountability, it's not. I had the privilege of going to Monday Night Solutions years ago, and I can't talk about the doctors because I haven't gotten permission to mention their names, but I learned a lot in terms of you men have to be accountable to each other emotionally also, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Let each other know what's going on, because if no one really knows, then women, we can talk all the time. I mean, for hours and hours, we cry and our hopes and our dreams, but when men don't have that, do you think that leaves it open for sexual addiction too?
Sexual addiction, perhaps even more than other addictions, thrives in secrecy.
Okay.
And we're just talking about that, how you keep it in a cylinder, how you keep your sexual addiction to yourself.
But with men, when you're together as a group, do you hold each other accountable? Do you talk about the things
in recovery? We do.
In your inadequacy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think that's why it's important to be in program and to give yourself to a higher power, as we call Jesus Christ, to be able to do that, to not be condemned or judged, because, like we were saying, Bruce, it's such it carries so much shame and it carries so much disappointment. And for men, we search so much for that validation that we'll do anything for it. We'll do anything for it. So I think in program, you create a foundation of men that you can trust to speak to. Like I have Bruce that I can come to when I feel that I need to express myself emotionally, to vent.
Where your wife, I think most wives are going, well, I want to validate you. I want to. Maybe when we come back, you can. I don't know whether we're going to
take a quick commercial break, but yeah,
I'd like to hear from
right.
What can a woman do? What should she do when she's faced with these kind of dilemmas?
Well, when we come back, we're going to discuss that and also discuss Bruce's relationship now with his wife that has grown into another level, another step because of his surrender, because of his recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joy in My House. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and we want to thank you again. Please feel free to Twitter us or call in at 323-247-7443, and we'll see you right back.
There was a day when he came in the manger as a baby. He didn't have a silver spoon, but he ruled the sun, the stars, and the moon. The prophet turned away, said, a king in the barn, that's the day. What's this kid gonna do? I'll be the savior of me.
Hey, are you spending your time or are you wasting your time? Well, kill some time hanging out with Michael Collier, Brooks Jackson, and the whole crew at the Michael Collier Morning Show. I Get Up Late. That's every Tuesday, 3 until 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you don't know what that is, you better get on the internet and look it up. And while you're there, go to latalklive.com and check me out.
Hi, this is Demetrius.
And I'm AJ, inviting you to join us every Tuesday at 5:30 for our all-new show, Real Talk with Demetrius and AJ.
We are your alternative to mainstream media's non-discussion of the real issues. No more sound bites, no more talking points, just real talk.
The guests on our show will include a wide array of people from all walks of life, elected officials, politically active celebrities, young leaders, and most importantly, you will all be included in this dialogue that is sure to be provocative and real.
So don't forget to tune in and listen to Real Talk with Demetrius and AJ every Tuesday at 5:30, exclusively on latalklive.com.
You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B, Live 365, Radio Flag, and now Stitcher Radio.
Or watch and listen directly at latalklive.com. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure.
This is LA Talk Live.
And we are more than just talk.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Joy in My House, an inspirational reality radio show where nothing is left unsaid.
And
No one is insignificant.
who's I'm looking at Van, I like your hat, and Jamal with your wonderful smiles. I want to wave to you guys and talk, but
Yeah, we want to right away thank our
Handsome men are
producers.
distracting me. I need to go to a meeting.
That's funny.
I'm just thinking on this show, there hasn't been much that's been left unsaid, has
No,
there?
there has not been.
Yeah, we're on a heavy topic. We're joined here by our in-studio guest, Bruce. Bruce, thank you again for coming in and just sharing your experiences, strength, and hope. Because it's
right.
something that I think we all need to listen, even me as a young man. Not young anymore, just as a man.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. It makes me feel real good.
Well, yeah, he's a young man. I'm like, yeah, what you talking about?
Well, you know, having 3 children and going through my craziness, you know, I feel that I don't have the luxury of making the same mistakes I made when I was younger. I have to survive these later years of my life because I don't think I have the strength to get up again. So every day when I live my life one day at a time, I truly do. One day at a time, one moment at a time. Because if I fall once again, I don't think I have it in me to get up again. So I fight for my life every day to stay sober and to be accountable. And it's such a struggle because, you know, like we're talking about right now about sexual addiction and acting out. And it carries so much shame and disappointment that you just want to give up. You just want to throw your hands up and say, you know what, forget it.
Yep.
I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the hardest thing to get back up on your feet. But thanks to the grace of God,
Amen.
that makes me feel that, you know what, He does not judge me. He does not condemn me. It allows me to get back up. And that's the only thing, me personally, it's the only thing I have that allows me to get back up on my feet.
Well, I have a
Amen.
burning question. I want to know, and I want to ask Bruce during the break, why is it not enough validation coming from a wife or a significant other?
And
It's a great question.
I can only answer for myself. But remember, it's a black hole.
Right.
And what do black holes do in space?
Suck everything.
They suck everything in, and they can never be filled up. And
Okay.
so it's an obsession with the need to be validated. And so one could wrestle through, all right, well, what if I had the fantasy relationship? Oh, well, then everything would be okay. Well, that's distorted thinking. That's magical thinking. Because whatever relationship one is in, there's always going to be something wrong.
Right.
And because there's always going to be something wrong, then there's, what's the next thing that
the
catches?
hope that something else out there.
Exactly. So it's always what's next. And it satisfies for a short period of time, but it doesn't satisfy in the long haul. And so there's always that sense of, well, yeah, but I need something more. And that's what the process of recovery is becoming aware that, that's a lie. And another thing in recovery that's been just incredibly helpful is coming to understand that my feelings are real, but they're not necessarily reality. Just
Right.
because I feel
is great.
insecure, just
Yeah.
because I feel inadequate does not
Feel
mean that
empty.
I am.
Right.
Right.
And so I have to combat that. And just because I think something doesn't mean it's real either. I can have
I
a
think
thought,
that's great.
but
My
Wow.
sponsor used to tell me all the time, and he still does actually, just because I have a feeling or a thought, it doesn't mean I need to dwell on it and hold on to
And
it.
act
nor
on it.
Because
nor
then
act
what
on it.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
what ends up
Right.
happening, exactly, it festers and it grows, and then it becomes a thought, a feeling, and then it becomes an action. So I have to have my thought process like a window. It comes in and it goes out. He always says it like a window, comes in and it comes out, because it's not reality. It's not always true. Yes, our feeling is true, but it doesn't make it real.
That's right.
My acting out then is what causes it to become reality. And if it's in a fantasy, like you said, it's magic. All the things that sex or acting out tell me is a lie. That I'm going to be intimate, that I'm going to be unioned with one, and it's not true.
And this going to fix it. This particular situation
is going to make me feel better, like you said. And sometimes it does make you feel better, like a drink, like getting high. But it's just such a quick fix, and it's a band-aid that doesn't really deal with the underlying issues, which allow you to go back and do it again, and it becomes that vicious cycle.
Well,
at least for me.
When you were saying that, I was thinking of I got a picture of like a bunch of beer bottles across, but then you leave women or men in a relationship. I mean, women do it too, to a certain degree, maybe not as much as men, but it's like you have all these alcohol bottles, you have all these relationships that you've kind of gone through, and that's pretty heavy if you look at it that way.
Yeah. And when I look back at my prior to my wife, my dating relationships, I mean, I was the role that sex played. I was desperately trying to fill that hole. I didn't understand it at that time, but I was desperately trying to fill that hole.
Well,
we were going to talk about emotional surrender. I think a lot of times, we say, we give this up, we surrender our habits, our acting out. But I think it goes deeper into that when it comes to sexual addiction. At least it's more to me than just surrendering physically. It's also surrendering emotionally, which is, I think, a lot deeper, and it starts dealing with emotions, which we were talking about, how feelings and thoughts don't have to dwell on for them to become actions. We were talking about that also when we were having coffee, about emotional surrender and how you have to constantly be giving yourself emotionally.
Well, and we talk about two different levels of sobriety. We talk about external sobriety, and I mentioned the time that I have of external sobriety, and we define that, as I mentioned before, as having no form of sex with oneself, which would obviously be masturbation, or with anyone other than one's spouse. And that's how in SA we measure and Celebrate Recovery, we measure our recovery is by that external criterion. Then we also have what we call internal sobriety. And internal sobriety has to do with our thinking, our visual imagery, our thought life. And so that would include the fantasies and all of that. Now, in CR we joke about, well, if we gave chips out for internal sobriety, we'd have to give out chips for 30 seconds instead of 30 days, because we know how men's minds work. But we strive to become ever better at, as we're instructed in the Bible, to take every thought captive. And that's quite a struggle. That's a discipline, to take every thought captive. But to work on not engaging in the kinds of thought life that takes us to dangerous places.
And that, I think, is what Every Man's Battle is about.
And that's why,
which, by the way, is a great book.
Those books either. Yeah, there is a book that Stephen Arterburn. We want to give him. That's his. That's his Stephen Arterburn. That's why I said I stopped those books too. It's you can't go there. If you go there, you're gonna go there, as they say.
Yeah, you dwell on that thought, that emotion, and it festers and it becomes an action. Now, you have a great testimony, but I really want to hear, and I ask this of all of our guests, is what does joy in my house mean to you now through your testimony, through your recovery? What does joy in my house mean to you?
To me, it's nothing short of a miracle. I was in recovery for just over 3 years, and we were driving. My wife and I were driving home from church one day, and I just asked her. I said, "So, do you see a difference in how I treat you today, especially in our intimate life, since I've been in recovery?" And she just said, "Yeah, I do." Okay, well, good. I mean, it wasn't a long, drawn-out discussion. She just acknowledged that she did. Saw. Then about 6 months later. So I'd been in recovery at that time about 3.5 years. So one night, my wife said, "Well, I want to talk with you." Of course, the fear and insecurity is
okay, when we want to talk, it's usually pretty serious. We need to talk.
Yeah, and my wife actually sat down. And she said, I in essence, using program talk, she made some amends to me for her part in the struggles that we had in intimacy in our marriage.
Wow.
Was she in program too?
No.
Okay.
Not. She knows programming. I mean, I've been around it enough.
Okay.
My
but-
wife is an introvert and a true internal
Oh, okay.
processor.
All right. but
Sitting
she
in a
made her
group is
amends.
not her idea of fun. Trust
Okay,
me.
But she made her amends.
But so she made her amends, and I hear people in the program, they say, Celebrate Recovery or the program, God has restored my marriage. And I say that, it's in my case, God has not restored my marriage. He has transformed
Oh, wow.
my marriage.
Oh, I love that.
Restoration is taking my marriage back to something that it was.
Mm-hmm.
My marriage is not what it was. My marriage is something it has not been in 30 years.
Oh, wow.
It is something entirely new. And, and one of the things that my wife says, I'm sorry it took me, 3.5 years. You put up with me for 30. 3.5 years is nothing. There's, and I am so incredibly grateful today.
Well, what were some of her amends, if you don't mind, without...
Just her part in how our intimate relationships had evolved over the years. And
Maybe she was shut down, too.
not
without going into her
just
stuff,
not fully engaging.
Right.
And so God has worked a miracle. So joy in my house, in my literal house, is that my marriage has been transformed.
Wow.
And it's, to me, God's kingdom is upside down.
Mm-hmm.
The first will be last. He who seeks to save his life is going to lose it, blah,
That's
blah,
right.
blah.
That is so true.
So in God's great upside down kingdom, what I wanted, all the intimacy that I longed for, I could never get when I pursued it
Right.
Wow.
or pushed for it
Mm-hmm.
or tried to control it or force it.
Mm-hmm.
I only received it as a gift when I let go of it all.
Oh,
Wow.
my goodness. That is so beautifully said.
That is great,
beautifully
Bruce.
said. That is so true. It's the opposite. When we surrender and let go, then he can fill.
Yeah.
And the stuff was there all along, really, if you think about it, huh?
That's right.
It's okay having a wife and kids and people not being, beauty queens or...
That's right. Well, Bruce, I want to thank you today.
Oh, me too. I've learned so much, and I hope a lot of women were able to take that, not take it personally, that we're not enough or we're not sexy enough, but no one person can fill up a big black hole, so
That's
that
right.
really helped
Now,
a lot.
it's
So
up to
thank
us
you.
to deal with the black hole and work with our Savior in order to get our
Oh.
lives right.
Congratulations
Thank
to
you.
your
We
family.
want to thank Bruce one more time for joining us here and giving his testimony and his insight through his strengths and hope. I know that I've gotten a lot out of it. Thank you so much, Bruce. I know that I've gotten a lot out of it. I hope that you listeners and viewers out there got an opportunity to listen to Bruce. Now, Bruce, are you speaking anywhere or anywhere where somebody maybe can come and hear you? Because I'm pretty sure that people got touched. I know I did.
I through the Celebrate Recovery program at Eastside Christian Church, I do teach there regularly. I also share my testimony whenever and wherever I'm
That's
asked. Most recently, I had the privilege of sharing my testimony at the church in which my wife and I were married,
Oh, how
Wow.
beautiful.
over in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, congratulations.
Wow.
And in
Beautiful.
January, I'll be sharing my testimony at the 7th Avenue campus of Park Crest.
Okay.
Park Crest in Long Beach.
Yay.
All
right.
Have
In Long
to bring
Beach.
some
Well, if
people
you'd like
out
to
there.
come and get a little more intimate with Bruce and his transparency, please feel free to join him. You can follow up with us on Join My House on Twitter.com, Join My House on Facebook. You can tweet us directly on LA Talk Live /Twitter. I want to thank Bruce for joining us and being transparent. Thank Lolita Robinson
Thank
for
you for
being my
being
co-host
here.
here and being an
Thank
amazing,
you.
amazing
Oh,
co-host.
love
And
you.
next week, we're going to have Osama Alfifi coming on. He is a producer and is very big in the Seattle music industry and will be joining us. In-house studio guest Osama Alfifi will be here. He helped Lolita on her production. He is a producer of Changes, her latest album. So we're going to have a great time with him and talk about music with him. And we want to thank our producer,
Yay,
Van Eric Marshall.
And
Jamal.
I was gonna
And
call-
Jamal here. He's interning here with
yes.
Van Eric Marshall. He did all our work today, so we want to thank him today. And we want to thank all you listeners and viewers out there. If you'd like to be part of this ministry and donate to us, please feel free.
Yeah,
You can find
please
us
help us.
at joinmyhouse.com. And you can email directly at info@joinmyhouse.com. We want to thank Dr. Reverend Linda Long for her donation and her support, Patrick Edgington, Larry Lorenzo, and Paul Obel for joining us. Please be blessed. Join us again next week. This is Join My House, ladies and gentlemen, inspirational reality radio show with a touch of recovery.
Hey, bye.
Great job.
Am I so far I need your presence.